Hello everyone, my name is Baljeet Kaur and today's topic of discussion is buoyancy. Now I have an empty ball in my hand. Now what happens when this empty ball keep inside the container having water? First it starts fill up with water and holding for some time. After some time just take it outside and what do you observe? Yes, it feels heavier than it was inside the bucket of water. Now what happens when this object put inside the container? This is, as we all know, that P is equals to H rho G, as pressure increases with depth. As you go deeper and deeper, because the pressure increases, the upward thrust exerted by the fluid on any object increases or more than the downward thrust or downward force applied on any object by the liquid. Right? So it all depends on the pressure and height. So this is, just look at here. This is object inside the container and this is pressure P1 applied and this is P2. Now force F1, that is F1 is equals to P1A and F2 is equals to P2. As we studied now that upward force is more than downward force, so net upward force acting on object submerged in the liquid is called upthrust. That is called buoyant force. It is called buoyant force or upthrust. So what it is? P1A minus P2A, which can be written as P1 minus P2 into. So this is known as, we can find it out, that buoyant force or upthrust, that is the upward force. Now let's take another example to prove this. What it is, now take an empty plastic bottle, drop it inside the container. What do you observe? What do you notice? That it starts float, right? What is the reason? We know that the upward thrust applied by this liquid on this object, this is the reason that it starts floating. Now hold this plastic bottle deep inside the water. What do you feel? That this upward force exerted by the plastic bottle against your hand. Okay, now release it. Now what happens? It comes back at the surface. Again same, repeat this experiment. Keep this bottle, hold this bottle deeper inside it. And then the same feeling that it exerts an upward force more than the previous one against my hand. Now release it again. And what do you observe? That it immediately came back at the surface faster than the previous one. Right? So this prove that as we go deeper and deeper, your pressure increases with depth. So this upward force exerted on any object is known as upthrust. Right? What we already have studied. Now I'm going to illustrate an interesting fact. Now what is this? I have two objects. This is a wooden piece and this is an iron nail. Now I drop it simultaneously inside the container having the water. What do you notice? Just look at it. Yes, this wooden piece starts floating and this iron nail sinks inside the container. Now what happens it is? According to the previous lecture, what we have studied earlier, these two objects should be float due to an upward thrust, right? But it should not be, because one is sinking inside it and one starts floated. Isn't it interesting? Now what happens? What is the reason behind it? The reason behind it is density. Now what is density? Density is mass per unit volume. Right? So density measures how much an object, how much mass compact in a substance. Right? So the SI unit of density is kg per unit volume. Okay. What happens that this wooden piece starts floating and the spin starts sinking. The reason is, of course, density. So density of wooden piece is less than this liquid, that is, we are using water, right? If the density is less than this, the upthrust applied by the fluid on an object is greater than the weight of fluid. So this is the reason it floats. So simultaneously, another one, we are talking about this pin. The density of pin is greater than density of water. That is why the upthrust applied on the pin by an fluid is less than the weight of the fluid, right? So this is the reason it starts sink. Now what does it include? That if the density of an object is less than the density of the liquid, that is fluid you are using. Right now we are using water. So it starts floating, and if the density of an object is greater than the fluid, it is sinking or it sinks. So this is what we conclude from all these experiments. So this experiment also leads to the new principle of physics, that is Archimedes' principle. Thank you.